Hi everyone, and welcome to a new TechTalk Dude session with Ronnie and me, as in myself. Today we're going to look at the new Defender for Endpoint features which have been announced on Ignite. And I will interview Ronnie based on the new functionalities which have been introduced. Ronnie, what can you tell what has been announced on Ignite this year? Or has been announced?
Yeah, there are many announcements this year at Ignite regarding to Defender for Endpoint, and just cover a few of them. Not in the last place, that the product itself is continuously evolving with all new features in order to be able to detect threats and make that you are secure. But one of the major announcements during Ignite was actually the new licensing form. So normally you had just the E5 license, including Defender for Endpoint. And now Microsoft make the distinction between a P1 license and a P2 license. So where functionalities, advanced functionalities are in the P2 license, like threat vulnerability management, automated remediation, and it's actually the detect and respond. And the P1 is more related on the protection side. It also includes it shows the capabilities with the P2 functionality. And in between those license forms, there's also another license SKU available, and it's the business variant. And the business variant is actually almost the entire product suite, but then limited to small and mid-sized companies up to 300 licenses or seats. So that's in general what about the licensing part of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint.
Check. So basically your advice to all the customers which are currently owning an E3 license, the advice would be then to have a look at the Defender for Endpoint P1 functionalities to implement that in their environment. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. It's enhancing your insights of your endpoints from a security perspective. And although you have other features like which Azure AD or the Microsoft 365 E3 provides, but it's definitely worthwhile to enable them.
Okay, check. Yeah. I also heard something about a new Defender for Endpoint, a new Defender for Endpoint solution stack for Windows Server 2012 and 2016. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. One of the main challenges in general is to keep up with all the operating systems. And before we go into more details, the best advice is to get to current and stay current. And that means also from a lifecycle perspective for your operating systems. So although we are now able to support Windows Server 2012 R2 and 2016, in the past we were able to already do so. The only thing was, and I'm going to share my screen to make it clear. And as you can see, in the past we had two approaches to manage 2012 R2 and 2016. And initially you had to install the SCAP client, System Center Endpoint Protection, for the antivirus component, and alongside with that you had to install the Microsoft Management Agent or the OMS agent, and that was to cover the EDR capabilities at some point. And both give you the full package of endpoint protection and extended detection and response capabilities, but that's a little bit of an hassle. And what we now did is to simplify and unify the onboarding approach. And with that, we are also introducing more capabilities. So with the SCAP client and the Microsoft Management Agents, we were a little bit limited in the capabilities we had to offer on 2012 R2 in 2016. But with the new unified agent, it's just installing the Defender for Endpoint client on the server and just use the onboarding package. So at least we minimize the prerequisites and just make it a straightforward process. So it eases the onboarding process as well as introducing new capabilities like threat and vulnerability management, enhanced protection, which we were not able to do with the traditional approach.
Check. Yeah. So if I understand it correctly, either the installation and onboarding process has been made more convenient and more generic compared to the 2019 Windows Server as an example, and it offers as well more functionalities.
Yeah, exactly. It simplifies the onboarding, the management part, and it comes with additional functionalities and protection capabilities. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And then once, of course, installed, people can still manage it in the same way, like with GPOs, with Microsoft Configuration Manager, with Endpoint Manager, etc., etc. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. You can still manage your systems with the management solutions, as you can see also here. And that's a good point, actually, Pim, you're mentioning, because that also bridges to a next topic, next future, which was introduced or announced during Ignite. And that is security management. So in the previous slide, we were assuming that you are managing your endpoints. So either your endpoints, Windows endpoints or server endpoints. Mm-hmm. And you can see that here, that's the first category where you are managing them through Endpoint Manager, whether it's cloud only, it's co-managed or cross-platform. And we have SCCM to manage your workloads as well. And the new kid of the block is actually the last part, and that's actually MDE attach. And with MDE attach, we are actually able to apply policies, so MDE policies, through the MDE client or engine to endpoints that can be Windows or server OSs without the need of being managed by SCCM or Endpoint Manager.
Yeah, so if I understand that correctly, those are maybe just regular domain joined clients which are joined to a domain and not managed by any system, maybe besides GPOs, of course.
For example, it can be.
For example, so no Intune is required, no configuration manager, and we can still offer them the benefits from the cloud.
Yeah, it's important to emphasize Intune is required somehow, but that's not for the management section. So with Intune, you're normally using Intune Endpoint Manager to manage your endpoints, whether it are Windows or server endpoints. Intune, you're still needing for the policies, so creating the policies. However, the mechanism to the transport layer actually to bring those policies to your endpoints, therefore you don't need that your endpoints are managed by Endpoint Manager or Config Manager. That's through your Defender for Endpoint engine, which is actually a broker. And I can show you on the next slide to explain it a bit more, how that works.
So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so at the left side, you have your endpoint, your Defender for Endpoint, which needs to be onboarded. So that's still a requirement. So you should have a mechanism to onboard your device and register them into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So that's the first step. That can be manually, that can be scripted, that can be by group policies, that can be by various methods. And once your endpoint is onboarded in MDE, the engine is actually exploring or detecting if the endpoint is being managed by whether Endpoint Manager or Configuration Manager. And once it detects it's not managed through any way, then it's actually creating a trust relationship to Azure AD. So you need the kind of federation for that. So that can be through your Azure AD Connect sync, to make that hybrid join, for example, or just an Azure ID registration. So not a domain join, but registration. And that gives you the trust relationship between the endpoint and your Azure Active Directory tenant. And that enables actually to bind and add them to a group and apply your policies to that particular Azure AD security group.
Okay, so actually what you're saying is we install the Defender for Endpoint client, the device gets registered or either hybrid joined to the Azure Active Directory. It's still not managed via Microsoft Endpoint Manager in any kind of way, but it does report to it, and it still retrieves the endpoint security policies configured within Microsoft Endpoint Manager so that they will be sent over to the device and reported back as well, of course.
Yeah, that's true. It's actually through the msense.exe, which is the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Services, which is actually kind of a broker to consume the policies which is retrieved through the Active Directory trust relationship, come down to the MDE engine and got applied. So Intune is still required, or Endpoint Manager is still required to create those policies and scope them, apply them to that particular Azure AD security group.
Check. And can you maybe show everyone who's watching how that looks within the admin interface, and maybe some tips and tricks which they can get along to manage this?
Yeah, sure. As you can see here, there are two devices available in our tenant here. So we do have an endpoint which is managed, which is Azure AD joined, but is also managed through Intune. So this is actually the regular and normal approach. So this device is managed and will retrieve the endpoint settings, security settings, and the MDE settings through Intune as the MDM engine. Yep. The other one is Azure AD registered, but it's not managed by MDM, neither by SCCM or Endpoint Configuration Manager.
Yeah.
So that's actually the status from an Azure AD perspective, the trust relationship from an identity, and the management relationship. If we are going over to Endpoint Manager, and this applies to currently 4 policies. It's the antivirus policy, the firewall policy, the endpoint detection and response, and the attack surface reduction policy. And actually, you can see it here already, the distinction. I created some policies up front. As you can see, this is the onboarding package, including some settings, and this is for the unmanaged clients. And with it unmanaged without any endpoint manager agent. And as you can see here also, the target is slightly different. It's not only for MDM, but also the Microsoft Sense executable, which is the MDE engine services. And once you're creating a policy, you can see also the distinction. In either way, it's an end through here. You see, this is the regular one, as you normally should create and deploy to your managed clients. Mm-hmm. Now you're creating it to a policy to your clients which are not management, and that's actually how you apply these policies through the new security management architecture for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint.
Yeah, okay, that's great functionality, and it's advisable though that we use groups, of course, which don't overlap, I guess, because otherwise that will result in conflicts still.
Yeah, you should indeed carefully. It's a good point. You should be carefully how you are scoping and targeting these policies. And I would definitely recommend to separate these and apply them to different groups. Although it can be targeted to a single group, but yeah, to keep the control and also from a reporting perspective, I would definitely separate them.
Yeah. Check. Okay, that's great. So that actually means that we can, if we just look at, because the Windows 10 part is mostly managed with Endpoint Manager, But if not, then still we would be able to use this functionality, of course, if it's a different MDM instance used. But when looking at servers, there are a lot of improvements introduced. It's simple onboarding, and instead of that, we in the past need to manage those machines either via co-management or something else. We can now just natively manage them with the Microsoft Sense agent via the Endpoint Manager console in Intune. That's one single way of managing your endpoint security rules and devices, rules and assignments from one single place. That's a big improvement.
Yeah, it's simplifying our management and the onboarding approach to make it more easier. That's one important improvement. And the second improvement is also we know from history perspective, Defender for Endpoint was shipped by Windows. It's native, and also with Windows Server 2019 and above, it's part of the build. It's built-in, not bolt-on security. And what we are now trying to do this also with the unified onboarding approach is that not only the management improve that from that perspective, but also trying to make the functionalities on par cross-platform. So that we also, the capabilities we do have for Windows 10 and 11, we're also trying to apply them and provide them to older operating systems, also down-level support through older versions. And again, it's not an incentive to keep up with those operating systems. I highly recommend and encourage you to do the upgrades, go to the server 2019 or 22 to make sure you're stay current and there's better security. But for those, and there are various business reasons why organizations are not always able to migrate to newer versions, whether it's compatibility, is applications, or it's high mission critical, then at least we can keep those operating systems secure in the meantime.
Check. Well, thanks, Ronnie, for these great insights. It's definitely something I need to implement in my lab environment.
I'm more than happy to invite you to do so.
Okay, I think that's it for now.
Yeah, that's it for now. And there are many more things to discuss about Defender for Endpoint, but yeah, let's keep them for a next session, and looking forward to that.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for your insights, and see you next time.
Well, thanks for having me, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.